Tessa thought marrying a blind Mafia boss was the worst thing that could happen. But on her first night as his wife, she learned two things. Someone in that house was planning to kill him, and they had already buried the woman who came before her. Welcome to the channel, lovelies. Please like and subscribe. Tessa Richards' hands trembled as she stared at the document on her father's kitchen table. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that important people used when they wanted you to know you had no choice. Her father sat across from her, his face grey, his eyes unable to meet hers. "Papa, look at me." Tessa's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Look at me and tell me this is real." Her father's hands shook as he reached for his water glass. He missed, knocked it over. Neither of them moved to clean it. Down the hall, her younger brother Joshua coughed, a wet, rattling sound that had become the soundtrack of their dying family. 2.5 million rand, Tessa whispered, her finger tracing the number on the page. You gambled away 2.5 million rand to the Korean Mafia. She looked up, and the devastation in her father's face told her everything. "How long, Papa? How long have you been in bed with the Choi family?" "Tessa, please. How long?" 3 years. Her father's voice broke. It started small. A loan here, a favour there. They said they understood struggle. They said they wanted to help the community. He laughed, a bitter sound. By the time I realised what they were, it was too late. And then Joshua got sick, and the medical bills. So you sold me. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. You sold your daughter to criminals to pay for your addiction. The man sitting beside her father cleared his throat, and Tessa turned to face him for the first time. Mr. Choi looked almost kind with his expensive suit and gentle smile, the smile of someone who knew he held all the cards and could afford to be gracious about it. "Miss Richard," he said, his English perfect, barely a trace of an accent. "I understand your anger, but let's be clear about the situation. Your brother has perhaps 3 months without the treatment he needs. The treatment costs 600,000 rand. You don't have it. Your father's debt to my family is 2.5 million rand. He doesn't have it. Without intervention, you lose your brother, your home, and likely your father's life as well." He slid another document across the table. I'm offering you a way to save all 3. Tessa forced herself to read it. Every word was a nail in the coffin of her old life. You want me to marry Im Woo-jin, your blind nephew, a man I've never met. My nephew is the heir to a considerable empire you would want for nothing. Accept my freedom. Miss Richard, let's not pretend you have freedom now. You're an accountant at a consulting firm, making 80,000 rand a year. You're drowning in your family's debt. You spend your weekends at a hospital watching your brother die by inches. Mr. Choi leaned forward. I'm not taking your freedom. I'm offering you a different cage, a much more comfortable one. Tessa's stomach turned. She thought of Joshua, barely 15, his body failing him. She thought of her mother's grave, the promises she'd made. What choice was there? Really? But even as despair threatened to swallow her, something else stirred. Anger. Cold, calculating anger. This isn't help, Mr. Choi. Tessa met his eyes with a directness that made him pause. This is survival dressed as mercy. You're betting I'm desperate enough to sign anything, that I'll be grateful for the scraps you throw me. She straightened in her chair. But here's what's going to happen instead. I'll marry your nephew. I'll play whatever role you need me to play, but Joshua's treatment begins tomorrow. Not next week, not when paperwork clears. Tomorrow. And I keep my job at Deloitte. I worked too damn hard to build that career to watch it disappear, because your family needs a convenient bride." The room went silent. Her father looked like he might pass out. But Mr. Choi's smile widened, and this time it reached his eyes. "Ah, you have fire," he said quietly. "Good. You'll need it." He pulled out a phone, made a call in rapid Korean, then nodded. "Done. Your brother will be admitted to Groot Shore Hospital tomorrow morning. Their oncology department is expecting him. As for your job," he paused, "you may keep it for now, though I suspect you won't want it for long." "Why?" "Because my nephew is going to need you for something much more important than balancing spreadsheets for corporate clients, Miss Richard." Mr. Choi stood, buttoning his jacket. "The wedding is in 3 days. Someone will collect you." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Miss Richard, that fire? Don't let anyone in Korea put it out. You're going to need every bit of it to survive what's coming." 3 days later, Tessa stood at the gates of the Choi compound in Korea, watching armed guards wave her car through checkpoints disguised as farm security. The estate sprawled across rolling hills covered in vineyards, beautiful and impenetrable. Her entire life fit in a single suitcase in the trunk. A woman in a crisp uniform met her at the main house. "Miss Richard, I'm Ms. Park. I'll show you to your room. Mrs. Choi requests you join the family for dinner at 7. Do not be late." "Wait," Tessa said as Mrs. Park turned to leave. "I'm Woo Jin. My husband. Where is he?" Ms. Park's expression didn't change. "Mr. Im doesn't meet commodities before they've been delivered, miss. You'll see him at dinner." She walked away, leaving Tessa standing in a marble foyer that probably cost more than her childhood home. The bedroom they'd given her was larger than her apartment in Johannesburg, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the vineyards. A king-sized bed dominated the space. Everything was perfect, expensive, and felt like a very beautiful cage. Tessa unpacked her few belongings, showered, and dressed in the only formal dress she owned. At 6:55, she made her way to the dining room, her heels clicking on marble floors. The family was already seated. Tessa's breath caught despite herself. Im Woo-jin sat at the head of the table, and he was devastatingly handsome. Sharp features, dark hair swept back, expensive dark glasses that concealed eyes she would never see. He didn't turn when she entered, didn't acknowledge her at all. "Miss Richard." The woman to his right spoke, her voice carrying authority and ice in equal measure. "I'm Mrs. Choi. You'll sit there." She gestured to a chair far from everyone else. Tessa sat. The staff began serving, their whispers in Korean creating a wall of sound she couldn't penetrate. Only one person smiled at her, a young woman across the table, maybe 20, with kind eyes. "I'm Da-eun," she said softly. "Woo-jin's sister. Welcome." "Thank you," Tessa said, grateful for any shred of humanity in the ice-cold room. "Dae-eun, we speak Korean at family dinner," Mrs. Choi said sharply. "She doesn't speak Korean, Aunt. I was being polite to our guest." "She's not a guest, she's... enough." Woo-jin's voice cut through the tension like a knife. It was the first time he'd spoken, and his voice was deep, controlled, absolutely devoid of emotion. "Da-eun, thank you for welcoming my wife. Mrs. Im, I trust your brother is receiving treatment?" The use of the married name, spoken in that cold voice, felt like a brand. "Oh yes," Tessa managed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, it's a business arrangement. Gratitude isn't required." He paused, then added with deliberate cruelty. "In fact, let's be clear about what you are here. You're a debt payment, a transaction. The fact that you have a name is merely a courtesy." The words hit like a slap. Around the table, the staff went silent. Even Da-eun looked shocked. Tessa felt her face burn with humiliation, but she refused to let him see her cry. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Im. she said quietly, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Then it happened. Wu Jin reached for his water glass at the same moment Tessa reached for the salt. Their hands brushed. It was nothing, barely a touch, but he flinched violently. His jaw tightened. His hand jerked back as if she'd burned him. For just a second, something cracked in his careful composure. What was that? Fear? Disgust? Or something else entirely? "Excuse me," he said quietly, standing. "I have work." He left without another word, navigating the house with perfect precision despite his blindness, and Tessa was left wondering what kind of man she'd just married. That night, alone in her room, Tessa tried to process everything. She was brushing her teeth when she heard it. Voices in the hallway. Mrs. Choi's voice, low and controlled, speaking in English. "The girl is temporary. Once she serves her purpose, we'll handle her like we handled the last one." Another voice, male, responded in Korean. Mrs. Choi laughed. "Don't worry, she won't last 6 months. They never do." Tessa's blood turned to ice. The last one. There had been someone before her. Someone who had been temporary. Someone who had been handled. She pressed her ear against the door, but the voices faded down the hallway. When she finally climbed into bed, sleep was impossible. What happened to the woman who came before? And would she meet the same fate? The next morning, Tessa woke determined to understand this world. She moved through the house, observing, learning. What she discovered was more unsettling than Mrs. Choi's threat. Despite his blindness, Wu Jin moved through the compound with absolute certainty. She watched him navigate hallways without hesitation, turn corners with precision. During a business meeting, she accidentally witnessed through an open door he dissected shipping manifests with a level of detail that suggested he could see every word. "Container 4729 arrived 3 days late," he said, his fingers not even touching the papers in front of him. "The manifest shows machinery, but the weight is wrong. Someone's lying. Find out who before I lose patience." The men around the table looked terrified. This wasn't a man weakened by disability. This was a predator who had adapted. But there were other things too, things that didn't add up. Tessa had spent years analysing financial records, and the Choi family's books told a troubling tale. Money disappeared into phantom accounts. Invoices appeared for shipments that never arrived. Someone was stealing millions, and they were good at it. "Da-eun," Tessa caught the girl in the library that afternoon. "Can I ask you something?" Da-eun looked nervous. "Maybe. What is it?" "The household accounts, the business records. There are discrepancies. Large ones." Has anyone else noticed? The colour drained from Da-eun's face. "Tessa, please, don't ask questions. Please." "But someone's stealing." "I know!" Da-eun's voice dropped to a whisper. "I know, okay? But you don't understand what happens to people who ask questions here. Just stop. Please stop." An hour later, Tessa was summoned to Wu Jin's study. The room was dark, curtains drawn. He sat behind a massive desk, his dark glasses reflecting the dim light. "Sit down, Mrs. Im." Tessa sat, her heart pounding. "You've been here less than 48 hours, and you're already analysing our financial records, asking questions, making my staff uncomfortable." He leaned forward. "Let me be very clear. Curiosity in this house is fatal. Whatever you think you found, whatever clever observations your accounting brain has made, forget them. Stay in your lane." You were just nothing. You're here to fulfill a contract. That's all. Do you understand?" Tessa stood, anger overriding fear. "Perfectly." She was at the door when his voice stopped her, so quiet she almost missed it. "And Mrs. Im, lock your bedroom door at night." The words sent ice down her spine. "Why?" "Because I'm telling you to." He paused. "And Mrs. Im, your brother's treatment continues only as long as you remain cooperative. Test me, and we'll see how cooperative you can be when his chemotherapy suddenly becomes unavailable." Tessa's hands clenched at her sides. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't I?" His smile was cold. "You don't know me well enough to know what I would or wouldn't do. That's the problem with transactions, Mrs. Im. They come with conditions." That night, Tessa locked her door, checked it twice. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. Sleep came slowly, and she woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the hallway outside her room. She held her breath as they stopped directly outside her door. The handle turned. Slowly. Testing. The lock held. After an eternity, the footsteps retreated. But the question remained. Who had just tried to enter her room? And what would have happened if that door hadn't been locked? The next morning started like any other, but everything changed in the garden. Tessa was walking the grounds trying to clear her head when she saw him. Wu Jin collapsed among the roses, his body convulsing violently, foam at his lips, his fingers clawing at his throat. For a fraction of a second, everyone froze. The guards, the staff, even Da-un, who had been walking with Tessa. They all hesitated. But Tessa didn't. She ran. "Call an ambulance," she screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. Now. She started CPR, her hands pressing against his chest, counting compressions, trying to remember her training. His lips were turning blue. His body was fighting her. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, don't you dare die, don't you dare." When he finally gasped, sucking in air, she nearly sobbed with relief. The ambulance arrived. They loaded him onto a stretcher, and Tessa followed, covered in garden dirt and his sweat, because something in her refused to let him face this alone. In the hospital waiting room, she overheard the doctors. They thought she was family, and their words were clinical, devastating. Chronic, heavy metal poisoning, so consistent with long-term exposure. We're seeing organ damage, neurological impact. This isn't acute. Someone's been poisoning him for years. Tessa's blood ran cold. Years. Not an accident. Murder. Slow, methodical murder. That night, while the family maintained their vigil at the hospital, Tessa broke into Mrs. Choi's office. The lock took her 10 minutes to pick using a hairpin and a tutorial she'd watched on YouTube once. What she found inside made her stomach turn. Medical records. Pages documenting Wu Jin's decline. The blindness 3 years ago hadn't been an accident. It had been the first major symptom. And whoever had done it was still doing it, still slowly killing him. When Wu Jin returned to the compound 2 days later, Tessa was waiting. She cornered him in his study, threw the medical records on his desk. "You knew," she said. "You knew someone's been poisoning you, and you've done nothing." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached up and removed his dark glasses. His eyes were clouded, unfocused. But when he turned toward her, it felt like he could see straight through her. "I've known for almost a year," he said quietly. "Then why haven't you stopped it? Why haven't you found who's doing this?" "Because I can't prove who it is." His voice was hollow. Moving against family without proof means civil war. Everyone dies, including the innocent. "So you're just going to let them kill you?" "I was." He paused. "Until you." Tessa's breath caught. "What?" "The marriage wasn't about your debt, Tessa. It was about bringing in an outsider. someone who had nothing to gain from my death. I'm someone I could trust when I can't trust anyone else in this house. He turned fully toward her. You were the only person in this house who had nothing to gain from my death. The vulnerability in those words cracked something in Tessa's chest. This dangerous, controlled man was utterly alone. And somehow she'd become the only person standing between him and the grave. So, what do? She whispered. We find proof. We find who's killing me. And then we burn them to the ground. Their faces were inches apart. She could see the slight cloudiness in his eyes, could feel his breath on her skin. His hand came up, cupping her jaw with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Then his phone rang. The colour drained from his face as he answered. What? When? We'll be right there. What happened? Dayun's been in an accident. A bad one. We need to go. Now. The next few weeks blurred together. Dayun survived, but barely. Her car had been run off the road. The police called it an accident. Tessa and Woojin knew better. Someone had sent a message. No one is safe. In the aftermath, everything changed. Late nights in his study became routine. Tessa spread financial records across his desk, while Woojin explained the dark underbelly of his empire. But his blindness created obstacles she hadn't anticipated. This account, she said one night, pointing to a statement. It's moving money to a shell company in Mauritius. But the company doesn't exist. It's a ghost. Show me the routing numbers. She read them aloud, watched him process the information. But then a security alert flashed on her laptop screen. Someone was trying to breach their network. Woojin, we need to... What? What's happening? And there it was. The frustration in his voice. The limitation. He couldn't see the screen, couldn't read the threat, couldn't act fast enough. By the time she explained, precious seconds had been lost. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have... Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't apologise for my weakness. It's not a weakness, we just need to adapt. But she saw the truth in his clenched jaw. In this world, seconds mattered, and his blindness had just cost them. Despite the setback, he smiled at her later that night, a real smile, and it transformed his face. You're brilliant, you know that. I'm an accountant. I'm supposed to be good with numbers. No, he said quietly. You're brilliant and brave and far too good for this world. Woojin, let me finish. He stood, walked to where she sat, his hand finding her shoulder with practiced ease. I know what this marriage was supposed to be, a transaction, a contract. But somewhere along the way you became something else. Something I didn't expect. What's that? Her voice was barely a whisper. Hope. The word hung between them, fragile and terrifying. Tessa stood, and suddenly they were close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. I'm falling for you, he said. I know I shouldn't. I know this is dangerous. But I'm falling, and I don't know how to stop. Then don't, Tessa whispered. The family noticed the change. Mrs. Choi watched them with narrowed eyes, but she did something unexpected. She approached Tessa one morning with a gentle smile. My dear, I've been harsh with you. I apologise. Mrs. Choi took her hand. I want to help. Your brother's treatment. I've arranged for him to see a specialist in Switzerland. The best in the world. All expenses paid. Tessa's heart leaped. You'd do that? Of course. You're family now. Mrs. Choi squeezed her hand. All I ask is that you trust me. Work with me. Tell me what you and Woojin discuss in those late-night meetings of yours. And there it was. the trap hidden in kindness. Thank you, Tessa managed, her mind racing. That's incredibly generous. Think nothing of it. We're family. Mrs. Choi's smile didn't reach her eyes. Now, about those financial records you've been reviewing. Later that night, Tessa told Wu Jin everything. She's using Joshua against me. I'm offering help in exchange for information. Then we give her information, Wu Jin said quietly. False information. Let her think she's winning. Tessa was given a seat at business meetings. When Wu Jin introduced her to the Park family during a tense negotiation, he called her my wife, with weight behind the words. The Parks wanted territory the Choi controlled. The meeting was going badly until Tessa spoke up. You're looking at this wrong, she said, pulling up a map on her tablet. You don't need all the territory, you need the ports. Give them the inland routes, keep the coastal access, and split the profits 60-40. The room went silent. Then the Park family head laughed. Smart, very smart. We accept. When they left the meeting, it was raining. Wu Jin pulled her into the shadows of the parking garage and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a claim and a confession, and a promise all at once. You're mine, he breathed against her lips. Do you understand? You're mine, and I'm never letting you go. That night, Tessa couldn't stop smiling. She went to her room to change, to freshen up before dinner, and that's when she saw it. The file she'd been compiling, the one with the evidence linking the poison to someone inside the family, was gone. She tore through her belongings, her heart racing. Nothing. Someone had been in her room. Someone had taken the one piece of evidence that could have saved Wu Jin's life. And as she stood there, her hands shaking, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps that stopped outside her door. The handle turned. But this time, Tessa had forgotten to lock it. The door swung open, and Mrs. Choi stood in the doorway, holding the stolen file in her hand, a smile on her face that promised nothing but death. Looking for this, dear? She said softly. We need to talk about what happens to girls who ask too many questions. Tessa's mind raced. The window was too high. The door was blocked. She was trapped. You've been poisoning him. Your own nephew. Nephew? Mrs. Choi laughed, a sound like breaking glass. That blind fool isn't my nephew. My brother married a Korean woman, but Wu Jin, he's the son of a mistress, a half-breed who inherited everything that should have been mine. She moved closer. I've been waiting 3 years for him to die, 3 years of patience. And then you arrived, with your clever brain and your inconvenient morals. And suddenly, he had hope again. He'll know it was you. Will he? Or will he believe that his desperate little wife, drowning in debt, saw an opportunity and took it? 5 million rand is a lot of money, Miss Richard. Enough to pay for a brother's medical treatment, and then some. Mrs. Choi pulled out a phone, showed Tessa the screen. Bank transfers, signatures, access codes, all in Tessa's name. The evidence is already in place. By this time tomorrow, you'll be accused of embezzlement at the charity gala. The whole city will watch you fall. Wu Jin won't believe it, won't he? Mrs. Choi's smile widened. He's a man who's been betrayed by everyone he's ever trusted. His father's mistress abandoned him. His business partners have tried to kill him. Even his own blood wants him dead. She leaned in close. Say, how long do you think his faith in you will last when the evidence is this perfect? Tessa's hands clenched into fists. What do you want? I want you gone. Disappear tonight and I'll let you live. Stay and I'll make sure the accusations stick. You'll spend the next 10 years in a South African prison. Your brother will lose his treatment. Your father will lose everything. Mrs. Choi opened the door. You have until tomorrow night to decide. Choose wisely. Mrs. Im. The morning of the charity gala, Tessa woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no return address. Just thick, expensive paper that made her stomach turn. Inside was a single photograph. The woman was young, beautiful, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. She wore a wedding dress that looked eerily similar to the one Tessa had worn. On the back are written in elegant script, "The first Mrs. Im." She asked too many questions too. Tessa's hands shook as she turned the photo over again. The woman's face was unfamiliar, but the fear in her eyes was something Tessa recognised. She'd seen it in her own mirror. A knock on the door made her jump. Mrs. Choi entered without waiting for permission, her smile sharp as a blade. "Ah, you found my gift. I wanted you to understand something before tonight, dear." Mrs. Choi moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. That woman. She thought she could save Woo Jin too. She thought love would be enough. She thought if she just found enough evidence, exposed the right people, she could change everything. She paused, letting the words sink in. They found her body in the bay 3 months after the wedding. Tragic accident, they said. I fell from the cliffs during a midnight walk. Tessa's throat went dry. You killed her. I protected my family, just as I'll protect it from you, if necessary. Mrs. Choi's hand came up, almost gentle, touching Tessa's cheek. She moved to the door, paused. Choose wisely, Mrs. Im. I'd hate for your brother to lose his treatment over your stubbornness. Such a fragile boy. It would be terrible if something happened to him during one of his chemotherapy sessions. Medical accidents happen all the time. The door closed with a soft click. Tessa stood there, the photograph trembling in her hands, ice spreading through her veins. She should run. She should grab her things and disappear before Mrs. Choi made good on her threat. But then she thought of Woo Jin, of the man behind the ice, of late nights working together, of stolen kisses, of the way he'd said, "You're mine," like it was both a prayer and a promise. She couldn't run, not anymore. Which meant tonight at the gala, one of them was going to fall. Tessa just had to make sure it wasn't her. The charity gala was everything Tessa had dreaded. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, politicians, and crime lords mingling like old friends. She wore a dress Woo Jin had bought her, emerald green silk, that cost more than she used to make in a month. His hand rested on the small of her back as they entered, and for just a moment she let herself believe everything would be okay. "You're tense," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. "I'm fine." Liar. His thumb traced circles on her back. "What's wrong?" Before she could answer, the room's attention shifted. A screen lowered from the ceiling. Mrs. An Choi stood at the podium, microphone in hand, her smile benevolent. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Before we begin the auction, I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news to share about the Choi family." Tessa's blood turned to ice. "It has come to my attention that 5 million rand has been embezzled from our charitable foundation over the past month." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "The investigation has revealed the culprit." Mrs. Choi's eyes found Tessa across the room. Tessa Richard, or should I say, Mrs. Im. The screen filled with evidence, bank statements, transfer records, signatures that looked exactly like Tessa's handwriting, access codes only she should have known. The room erupted in whispers. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted a question. Tessa felt Woo Jin's hand fall away from her back. "Woo Jin?" she whispered, turning to him. "I didn't—" "The evidence is irrefutable," Mrs. Choi continued. We have video footage of Mrs. Im accessing the accounts. We have witnesses who heard her discussing financial difficulties. We even have messages she sent to an unknown account, arranging the transfers. That's a lie, Tessa's voice rang out across the ballroom. I never sent any messages. I never touched that money. Then explain this. The screen changed to show a video. Tessa, in the Choi compound office, typing at a computer. The timestamp showed last week. The account numbers matched the embezzlement exactly. Except Tessa had never been in that office, had never sat at that computer. It's fabricated, she said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Someone edited that footage. Mrs. Im. The police commissioner stepped forward, his face grave. I think you should come with us. No. Woo Jin's voice cut through the chaos. He stood perfectly still, his face unreadable behind those dark glasses. Nobody touches my wife. Hope flared in Tessa's chest. He believed her. He had to believe her. Woo Jin, Mrs. Choi said gently. I know this is difficult, but the evidence is convenient. Too convenient. His jaw was tight. Give me 24 hours to investigate. The law doesn't wait for family sentiment, the commissioner said. Mrs. Im, you need to come with us for questioning. Tessa looked at Woo Jin, desperate for him to say something, to defend her, to tell them all it was a lie. But he stood silent, his face carved from stone, and she saw it. The flicker of doubt, the hesitation. He wanted to believe her. But the evidence was drowning his faith. Fine, Tessa said quietly. She reached up, pulled off her wedding ring. The emerald caught the light as she placed it on the nearest table. I don't stay where I'm not believed, not even for love. Tessa? Woo Jin's hand reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't. If you believed me, you would have said so. Your silence told me everything I need to know. She looked at Mrs. Choi, saw the triumph in the older woman's eyes. I didn't take your money, but I'm done fighting for people who won't fight for me. She walked out of that ballroom with her head high, wearing a 5,000 rand dress and carrying nothing but her dignity. The cameras followed her every step. The whispers chased her into the night. And behind her, Woo Jin stood frozen, his hand still outstretched, reaching for a woman who was already gone. At the estate gates, as Tessa waited for a taxi that might never come, a hand touched her arm. Da-eun's face was pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know you didn't do it, she whispered. I know it was my aunt. I heard her planning it. Then tell Woo Jin. I can't, Da-eun's voice broke. If I help you, they'll kill me too. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. She pressed something into Tessa's hand. Cash. Enough for a flight. Run. Get as far from here as you can, and don't come back. 3 months later, Tessa sat in a small office in Durban, reviewing tax returns for a mom-and-pop restaurant. The work was mind-numbing. The pay was a fraction of what she'd made at Deloitte, but it was honest, and it was hers, and nobody was trying to frame her for crimes she didn't commit. Her hand drifted to her stomach, to the small swell that her loose blouses couldn't quite hide anymore. She'd discovered the pregnancy 2 weeks after leaving Korea, had spent 3 days crying, another week staring at the positive test, paralysed by indecision. She didn't know if bringing a child into this family was an act of hope or cruelty. The baby moved, a flutter against her palm, and tears stung her eyes. This child was innocent. This child deserved better than a mother running from shadows, better than a father who hadn't believed her when it mattered most. But what choice did she have? She hadn't told Woo Jin, hadn't contacted him at all. What would she say? You didn't believe me when I needed you most, but congratulations, you're going to be a father. No, this baby was hers, her choice, Her future. Her phone buzzed. I'm a news alert. She almost ignored it, but the headline caught her eye. Choi Air's health declining. Against her better judgment, she clicked. The photo showed Woo Jin at some business function. He looked terrible, gaunt, hollow, like a man who'd forgotten how to live. The article speculated about his illness, about his aunt taking control of the family business, about rumours that he was being married off to the Park family's eldest daughter to secure an alliance. Tessa's heart clenched. The poisoning was getting worse. Mrs. Choi was tightening her grip, and Woo Jin was dying, slowly, while everyone watched. Not my problem, she whispered to herself. But her hand stayed on her stomach, and she couldn't stop staring at his face on the screen. That night, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Tessa? Da-eun's voice was panicked, breathless. Oh God, you're okay. Listen to me. I found proof. Real proof. Bank records showing my aunt funneling money to pay for the fabricated evidence against you. I'm sending it to you now. Da-eun, what? Woo Jin's been investigating. He never stopped looking for you. He knows you were framed. He knows everything. Da-eun's voice cracked. He knows where you are, Tessa. He's coming for you. Relief flooded through her, so intense it hurt. When? Tomorrow, but Tessa, there's something else. Da-eun's voice dropped to a whisper. My aunt knows too. She's sending people. You need to run. Right now. Get somewhere public, somewhere safe. They're coming tonight. The line went dead. Tessa grabbed her bag, her laptop, the few possessions she cared about. She was halfway to the door when it burst open. 3 men, large, armed. They didn't bother with pretense. Mrs. Choi sends her regards, the first one said, but they'd miscalculated, because Tessa wasn't alone. Woo Jin stood in the hallway behind them, and despite his blindness, despite his weakened state, he moved like death itself. The first man went down before he even realised Woo Jin was there. The sound of his head hitting the wall was sickening. The second man drew a gun, but Woo Jin was already moving, using sound to track the movement, his hand finding the man's wrist and twisting until bones snapped. But then the third man moved silently, coming from Woo Jin's blind spot. Woo Jin turned too late, couldn't see the knife coming. Woo Jin! Tessa screamed, grabbing a lamp and smashing it against the man's head. He went down hard. Woo Jin stood there, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles, a cut on his arm where the knife had grazed him. Tessa? I'm here, I'm okay. She touched his face, guided him away from the bodies. You came. Of course I came. His voice was rough. Touch her, he said to the unconscious men, and I'll kill all of you. Then he turned toward Tessa, and even though he couldn't see her, his face found hers with perfect precision. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry I doubted you. I have proof. I have everything. I know what my aunt did. I know you were innocent. His voice broke. Tessa, please. I know I don't deserve it, but please give me a chance to make this right. That's when his hands dropped, to her stomach, to the small swell she'd been hiding. The air left his lungs in a rush. You're pregnant. 14 weeks, Tessa said quietly. Is it? Yes. Woo Jin's knees buckled. He actually dropped to the floor, his hands shaking. You were carrying my child, and I let you walk away. You were alone, and I... He couldn't finish. Just knelt there, this powerful, dangerous man, broken by his own failures. I spent 3 months learning to live without you, Tessa said, her voice harder than she intended. Don't make me do it again. I won't. I swear to God, Tessa, I will never doubt you again. I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you. He looked up, and even though his eyes couldn't see her, she felt the weight of his gaze. Come back with me. Not as my wife. Not as anything you don't want to be. But as my partner. Help me destroy my aunt. Help me burn down everything she's built. And when it's over, if you still want to leave, I'll let you go. And if I want to stay, then I'll spend every day for the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. Tessa stepped back, crossing her arms. Words, Wu Jin. You're good at words. But I need more than that. What do you want? I want you to mean it. I want you to prove it. She took a breath. You doubted me when everyone else did. You let me walk out of that gala alone. You let me think I was nothing to you. You were everything. Then prove it. When we go back, when we face your aunt, I'm not standing behind you. I'm standing beside you. Equal, partner, not property, not a transaction. Do you understand? Wu Jin nodded slowly. Yes. And one more thing. Tessa's voice was steel. You walk away from the Empire. All of it. I'm not raising my child in that world. You choose your legacy or us. The silence stretched. She saw the war on his face, the cost of what she was asking. Us, he said finally. I choose us. 2 weeks later, the Choi family compound was filled with every important member of the Korean syndicate in South Africa. Wu Jin had called a family summit, and nobody dared refuse. They sat in the Great Hall, these powerful men and women, watching as Wu Jin stood at the head of the table. Tessa sat beside him, her hand in his, very visible and very present. Mrs. Choi smiled indulgently. Nephew, if this is about your wife's return, we can discuss appropriate consequences. Sit down and shut up. Wu Jin's voice was ice. You've been embezzling from this family for 6 years. You've been poisoning me for 3. You framed my wife for theft. You tried to have her killed. He nodded to Da-un, who stepped forward with a laptop. Show them. The screens around the room filled with evidence. Bank records, transfer receipts, medical reports showing the source of the poison traced back to Mrs. Choi's personal physician. Video footage of her meeting with the men who'd fabricated the evidence against Tessa. Every crime, every betrayal, laid bare for everyone to see. The room erupted, shouting, accusations. Mrs. Choi's face went white, then red. This is fabricated. My nephew is ill, he's not thinking clearly. The evidence has been verified by 3 independent accounting firms, Tessa said calmly. I made sure of that. You're finished, Mrs. Choi. The vote was unanimous. Mrs. Choi was stripped of all power, all titles, all claims to the family. She was exiled, sent back to Korea with nothing but the clothes on her back. Wu Jin watched her leave without a word. Then he turned to the assembled families and said something nobody expected. I'm dissolving the Choi crime empire. Effective immediately. Chaos. Absolute chaos. But Wu Jin raised his hand. I've spent my whole life in darkness, literal and metaphorical. I'm done. I'm walking away from all of it. The smuggling, the extortion, the violence. I'm building something legitimate. A security consulting firm. Legal, clean. Anyone who wants to join me is welcome. Anyone who doesn't, I'll pay you out fairly and we'll part ways. You're destroying everything your father built, someone shouted. My father built an empire on blood and fear. I'm choosing something different. He looked at Tessa. I'm choosing love. I'm choosing hope. I'm choosing a future where my child doesn't grow up afraid. Half the room walked out, but half stayed. And in the end, that was enough. But it came at a cost. 3 of Wu Jin's most loyal men died in the transition, killed by those who refused to accept the change. Dae-un was hospitalized for a week after a brutal attack. And Tessa lost her position at Deloitte permanently. No consulting firm wanted to touch someone with her history, fabricated or not. 6 months later, Tessa stood in a hospital room, gripping Wu Jin's hand so hard she was probably cutting off circulation. He was scheduled for experimental surgery in 2 hours, a procedure that might restore partial vision. He was terrified, she could tell, though he'd never admit it. "What if it doesn't work?" he asked quietly. "Then we'll be fine anyway." I didn't fall in love with your eyes, Wu Jin. I fell in love with your soul." "And if it does work, then you'll get to see our daughter's face when she—" Tessa gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Oh no. "What? What's wrong?" "My water just broke. Wu Jin, the baby's coming, right now." The surgery was postponed. Everything was postponed. Because 6 hours later, in a delivery room filled with chaos and joy and pain, Wu Jin held his daughter for the first time. He couldn't see her, wouldn't see her for another 3 months, until the surgery finally happened. And when it did, it was only partially successful. He regained some vision, enough to see shapes and light, enough to navigate without always needing assistance. But the world would always be blurred at the edges for him. Some things once broken, for never fully healed. But when the bandages came off and the world slowly came into focus, the first thing he saw was Tessa, holding their daughter, smiling at him with tears streaming down her face. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi." His voice was rough with emotion. "You're beautiful. You're both so beautiful." They married again, months later, not in a grand estate with hundreds of witnesses, in a small garden overlooking the ocean, with Da-eun as maid of honour and a handful of friends as witnesses. Tessa wore traditional South African beadwork woven into her hair. Wu Jin wore a hanbok. They blended their cultures, their histories, their futures into something entirely their own. "This time I'm choosing you," Wu Jin said as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Every day, forever." "Forever," Tessa echoed. "No contracts, no coercion. Just choice." Their daughter laughed from Da-eun's arms, and somewhere in the distance, the ocean roared its approval. 1 year later, they stood on a beach in Korea, watching the sunset. Wu Jin's vision wasn't perfect, would never be perfect, but it was enough. Enough to see his daughter running toward the waves, Tessa's hand in his, the future stretching out before them like the endless horizon. "Do you regret it?" Tessa asked. "Giving up the empire? The power? The men we lost?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I regret the cost. I regret that good people died for my choices. I regret that every day." He pulled her close. "But I don't regret choosing you. I don't regret choosing this life. I traded darkness for light, fear for love, survival for living. That's not a sacrifice, and that's salvation." "You're getting poetic in your old age." "I'm 34. "Ancient." She laughed, but it was softer now, weighted with everything they'd lost to get here. Their daughter shrieked with delight as a wave crashed over her feet. Da-eun chased after her, limping slightly from injuries that never fully healed. And Wu Jin realised that this, right here, was everything. Not power, not wealth, not revenge. Just love. Just choice. Just a woman who'd been forced into his life and had chosen to stay. Just a future built on something real. Just forever. The end. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional roller coasters that'll have you binge watching until 3 a.m. Trust me, you won't regret it. See you in the next story.